I love people like this. This woman is asking about the psychological impact that leaving your baby right after they're born to go to work has on a child for the rest of their lives. And she's right. There's actually a lot of bogus studies out there showing that it's perfectly fine to put your child in daycare and, again, biased agenda. One of my favorite clinical psychoanalysts, her name is Dr. Erica Commissar, speaks on the matter of leaving your children to go back to work better than anyone I've ever heard explain it. Mind you, she's done the studies. She has over 30 years of experience, and she's not the only doctor that speaks out on this. She has researched neuroscience, epigenetics, attachment theory, behavioral science, and neuropsychal biology, which is apparently all of those fields combined. And she wrote a book called Being There: Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years Matters. The biggest neurological growth spurt that a human has is within the first 2 years of their lives. She also discusses that women leaving babies in daycares or even at home while they go to work has created 2 generations of people with attachment issues. That is the childhood trauma that has now led to generations like millennials, Gen Zers, and the ones below us having zero ability to date, find companionship, find partners. Everyone wants to blame social media and dating apps when in reality, it started way younger than that when we were born, because our mothers left us to go back to work because that is what our culture taught us was right to do. And based off her research, she has also ranked the types of different care that you can give your children from least to best. Daycare being the absolute worst. Then she talks about nannies, and then she talks about having like a kinship nanny, meaning someone that's related to you, like maybe your mother helps you watch the baby while you go to work. When I attempted to work after my first child, it was my niece, who's like my sister. She also gives you like a neurological breakdown of what happens to children when you leave them, specifically babies. Like when they're newborns, we tend to go back to work at 3 months. That child should still be, and I say should not in a judgy way, but it should still be on the breast of the mother. And she claims that they should not be left for more than like an hour, sometimes 2 hours max. We think that because babies are small and cannot communicate, that they're fine when we leave them, when in reality, they have these deep sense of abandonment issues. Because what most people don't realize is that the only reason humans are born so early is because our heads outgrow the mother's body. So we're carry primates. When we come outside, earthbound, outside of our mothers, we are still supposed to be attached to them for about 2 years. That is why many cultures wear their children until they're 2 years old. She also claims that this is why mothers are so unhappy in America and why babies cry so much, because we are taught to let them cry it out. We're taught to put them down, that they don't have to be on us. When in like Eastern European countries and Africa, mothers hold their babies all the time and babies don't cry as much. I co-slept with my children, and I can tell you that there was a night and day difference between my children and even my second child that I did more with since he was born compared to my first, because I learned from my previous situation. She also discusses that how children under the age of 1 have to be soothed moment to moment, meaning the minute they cry, you are supposed to pick them up and soothe them. And this is how we regulate their cortisol levels. This is how we become, I believe she calls it a buffer between their stress and them, and how children are very dependent on their caregiver to regulate their emotions for them. Again, this is why I do not agree with the whole cry it out method that the boomers taught us. Now, we didn't know the impact of what the Boss Babe movement would do, or having women leave their children, go back to work, until, of course, generations later, because we were the guinea pigs. But now they have the actual effects of it. They have millions of people and Gen Zers and millennials and even some boomers where they can actually take data from and figure out why it was so detrimental to leave our children at home to go back to work at such an early age. Now, you cannot soothe a baby moment to moment when you're in a daycare. And I know this firsthand because I worked at a learning center in East Texas for like 6 months. It was terrible. It was horrible. We had 2 people working in a room with 13 children, which I believe was even illegal at that time. It broke my heart every day because there was no way I could comfort and soothe every single baby that was there. And I could absolutely witness firsthand the effects that it was having on their development. That is why it is important to have one person caretaking for this baby, and ideally it's the mother. She also discusses this thing called share the care, I guess, that they do in California, where they basically, parents will share the cost of a nanny to make it more affordable, so that they have maybe 3 kids with one nanny, and she discusses how that's better than, for instance, putting someone in a daycare where they don't have as much attention between the caregiver and 13 other children. I'll add another video with some of her clips, but basically, I also would like to add that common sense comes into play here. I don't like giving my child to anyone because at the end of the day, it was my brain that chemically reacted when I got pregnant and then gave birth. It was my amygdala and prefrontal cortex that swelled and changed so that I could be more attentive to my child. Even in the case of my husband watching my newborn children, I never wanted to offend him, but I would always be like, hey, are you watching him? Hey, is he near a pool? Can you see your peripheral vision? Is he there? Because a mom can see literally everything. It is innate and biological. No one can ever love or watch your child better than you can after you birth them. But day after day, we give birth, we go back to work after 3 months, and then we leave our children with strangers, in the case of daycare at least. And then they come home with RSV or a broken arm or even maybe sexual trauma. And we sit here and we wonder, how could that happen? Well, quite frankly, it's because nobody could care for your child the way you did. Not physiologically, not biologically, not spiritually. So with some of these studies that have come out saying that it's perfectly normal for our children to leave us and go to daycare very early in their infancy, I have to question, where's the common sense? And who put out those studies? And is it pointing us in a direction of a very biased agenda? Lastly, I will end with this. It is something you cannot take back. I have chosen with my family to sacrifice whatever extra income I could bring to stay home with my children, because if it takes the first 3 years, according to these neuroscientists, to create the best foundation for the rest of the child's life, they've literally said just give it the first 2 to 3 years and there's almost no way of messing up your child. I would rather live without regret. I would rather tell women this so that they can live without regret, because at the end of the day, it is such a short chapter. It is such a small journey. And even if on the off chance we are wrong, you didn't hurt the situation as a mother by being there for your baby when they were born, versus taking the risk of dropping them off with strangers and just seeing how they turn out when they're 25. Those are just my thoughts.